from Sports Illustrated, the man who writes those great pieces for MMQB.com. Our friend, Albert Breer, back here on the show. How are you, Albert?
I'm good. How you doing, Rich?
I'm hanging in there. I just kind of got a little bit pissed by the whole Mike Gundy thing.
Gundy wormhole.
Did I go in a Gundy wormhole?
Yeah, didn't see that coming.
I didn't see. Well, I mean, I had to set the stage for Pat Forty later on, but what's going on the front of Colin Kaepernick, Albert? Let's just jump right in on that subject right off the bat. The commissioner going on ESPN on that return to sports special that had so many of the most powerful people in sports in front of Mike Greenberg's Q&A. So the commissioner said he's encouraging teams to sign him. What are things stand on that front right now?
Well, I think it's significant that he said it publicly. I do know that there were some people, at the league office in 16 and 17 that really wanted, Colin Kaepernick to find a home. And, they really felt like it would have been a good story for the league. But, I think, sort of the way things worked back then, I think it was seen as a way more negative story than it is now. And so, I think the fact that the commissioner feels comfortable coming out and saying it publicly is significant. And I think it also kind of provides cover for a team to come and sign him because, the commissioner was the first one to actually speak publicly at length about it the way that he did. And so, look, I think we've all acknowledged now, a big piece of this was always, in 16 and 17, a big piece of the reason why he couldn't find a home was because a lot of teams weren't willing to put up with everything that would come along with Colin Kaepernick, when most would have employed him as a backup quarterback. Well, now, if you look at all that stuff, that extra stuff that comes along with him, where I think a lot of that stuff was seen as negative back then, now, I think for some teams in some markets, signing him would be a positive. It might be a PR win for some teams. And so I think that's sort of how the landscape's changed. It doesn't mean it's not complicated from here. But I do think that, what the commissioner came out and, said was reflective of a changing attitude across the league. And, the fact that he's willing to say it publicly instead of just having people in his office talk about it privately is significant too.
So here's the question, Albert, is we just don't know what Kaepernick thinks of all this, because even if there are a couple teams that say, definitely let's get him, because yesterday I made a point, and I think Peter King has made the point, I'm sure you have too, that, in the COVID-19 2020 NFL season, and as we've seen with the NBA, multiple positives will not shut down the sport. They're going to try and figure this thing out, either on the fly or with as much of a plan in place in advance. The NFL the same way. Dr. Alan Sills, the chief medical officer, is on this show. I mentioned about having like a COVID-19 protocol similar to the concussion protocol. Someone has to clear it to return. He said yes, that a third string quarterback even could play a significant role for a team in 2020 NFL season. The question is, though, is what does Kaepernick want? What does he want? He hasn't said a word on this front. What do you think he wants? Colin, you hearing anything I don't know on this front?
I mean, I wish I had a better answer for you. I mean, I think really kind of the operative things here, though. Number one, we've seen the NFL find a way to manufacture jobs for guys in the past, right? It happened with Michael Sam, to a degree with the Cowboys in 2014. And so, if that's part of this, how does Kaepernick look at that? You know what I'm saying? Like, does he look at that and say, well, this isn't on the up and up. This smells funny. I don't want to do it. So there's that element of it, like how this whole thing kind of, if there is a job offer, how it just sort of manifests itself. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, is he willing to go in somewhere on low money with no guarantee of a job? I think it's important to remember, as last year in the league, he was in the trade block. He was benched in the middle of the season, and so, I think by definition, at the very end, he was seen as a backup quarterback, and now he's been out of the league for 3 years, and so, I mean, look, he could get into camp and kill it. I mean, it's possible that he finds a home and it's awesome. But it's also possible that 3 years have taken its toll. And so is he comfortable going somewhere knowing there's no guarantee that he's going to have a job in September just because he's there in July? And on the other side of that, is a team willing to take on the fact that if you do wind up cutting him at the end of training camp, that could create a problem for you. So, I think those are some of the complications that I think that everybody sort of has to work through. But I think that only Colin can answer, what he actually wants. And, I think if it's purely, I just want a shot to win a job. I just want a shot to get into a training camp and win a job. I certainly think that opportunity will probably be out there for him. And it'll just be, I would love to see it because I would love to see. I remember what he was in 2012 and 2013.
He's amazing. He's dynamite.
Even if there's 60, even if there's a piece of that magic left, it will be fun to watch.
Well, and plus, you want to talk about wanting to prove something. Again, just the question is the offering of a job. If he feels it's a token gesture, he's not going to take it, and he shouldn't. But
right.
There's really no such thing as a token gesture in 2020 NFL. Again, one quarterback can test positive. Exactly. This is a significant necessity to get as many quarterbacks that can play the game on your team, don't you think? In this year,
right.
For sure.
No question. And here, it's interesting. I think was it Bruce Arians? There was someone else that said publicly, talked about quarantining a quarterback, right? There were two coaches last week that talked about that. I've heard multiple teams talk about the idea of having meetings with their quarterbacks in separate rooms because it'd be risky to have them together all the time. If, say, one of the guys gets it, even if he's asymptomatic, you increase the likelihood that you wipe out your entire quarterback room. You wipe out your quarterback room, you're screwed. And so I certainly think there exists this possibility where if I'm one of these teams, maybe I'm bringing like 5 quarterbacks to camp, Rich, because I just want to have 5 quarterbacks that know my system.
You bet.
Knowing I might cut 2 of them, but those 2 guys are out there on the street, and I know I've got those guys sort of in reserve if there's some sort of outbreak, on my team. And so I'm with you. I think that there's going to be those sorts of opportunities out there for guys. And again, I think that the question then becomes, under what context does Colin want to return to the league? I think that's the question that's, I think, only he can answer.
Well, Anthony Lynn has just been quoted as saying Kaepernick fits the style of quarterback the Chargers want, and they have on a potential quote-unquote workout list. And again, Tyrod Taylor is your current starting quarterback right there. And so it sure looks like, and again, Los Angeles would be a city, I think, that would absolutely have no issue with Colin Kaepernick getting a gig here. And I'm sure there were others who would disagree with this. But the bottom line is the guy is good enough and has played in a Super Bowl. And this year, we have more opportunities for any quarterback than I can remember to play a significant role, an important role. That would be, and of course, Anthony Lynn being a person of color at the head coaching spot to say that he wants to do it and that he would be the guy to do it. Let's roll, right? That would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love the idea of it. Here's the problem, though. The problem with that, Rich, is what's his chance of making the team there? If you assume Tyrod Taylor is on the roster, right, because he's your starter right now, Justin Herbert isn't going anywhere.
Correct.
As your second string guy, or potentially your starter because you drafted him 5th overall, but obviously he's going to be on the team. And then, Easton Stick is a guy who I know a lot of people haven't heard of, but they spent a year in developing. And so, I think that's going to be sort of, I think for any player, in this sort of position, it's, where do I have the best chance of making the team? And I'm with you on everything you said, about the potential opportunity with the Chargers there. But is that the best situation for Cap? And I think that, if you look at it across the NFL, there might be better chances for him to make a team, get on the field somewhere, rather than the Chargers. But I'm with you as far as just the logistics, the way that sets up, that it would make sense for a few different reasons.
Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. And then, oh, by the way, there is a former MVP still out there who is in Los Angeles. We saw him working out with Odell Beckham. What is the scoop with Cam Newton as we're talking about so many different opportunities for quarterbacks? Yeah. But I assume he's waiting for the Teddy Bridgewater type injury that would happen, and he would then swoop in. Is that his plan right now, to get a gig in 2020?
Yeah. So what I've heard on him is that he's told people around him, and I'm sorry, I'm outside and there's cars around, so if you guys can hear that in the background.
It's all good, Albert. It's all good. You're about the hustle and bustle anyway.
So with Cam, I have heard that he's told people around him that he's not really interested right now in going to a place where he would be sort of the firm number two or a mentor to a young quarterback. Like, that's not the sort of job that he's looking for. And so, would he go somewhere as a backup? Maybe. But I don't think he's going to go to a backup where he's firmly the number two and the only chance you're going to play is if something catastrophic happens with the starter. And so, I think that's why he's content to sit and sort of wait this thing out a little bit. And, then you get to training camp, and one of two things has to happen. Either you've got a team like a New England, a Denver, a Jacksonville, where they got a young quarterback in place and maybe things don't play out the way that they thought they would with the young quarterback because they haven't had him in the spring and everything else. Or someone gets hurt, like you said, like a Ryan Tannehill situation from a few years ago when Jay Cutler came in, like the Bridgewater situation. And so, it seems like for right now, Cam's content to wait for something like that to pop up in the summer. It's risky, of course, but I think he not only wants to be on a team in 2020, he wants to play in 2020.
Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. And what are you hearing about the 2020 stuff? You heard on our buddy Lock and Four's local show in Baltimore, John Harbaugh say some of the health and safety protocols just merely for training camp were impossible. Yeah. Impossible. Nothing's going to be perfect here, certainly in a sport where a huddle or merely getting a set over a football, there's no social distancing whatsoever. So what are you hearing about this, Albert?
What I've heard now, this is sort of a preliminary list of protocols, and this is going to allow the teams to prepare for training camp. And to some degree, I think it was a press release too, and letting the public know and letting the players know and letting everyone know how seriously they're going to be taking this when we do get to training camp. There are things that would be logistically very difficult. The limits on meetings, obviously, the limits on, what you can do in a locker room. I talked to one head coach who, said, we're going to need 3 locker rooms based on our own logistics to make it work. I think for each of these teams, there's, challenges that are going to be very, very difficult to deal with, just based on the way the sport is and based on the way these facilities are set up and everything else. That said, while every coach I talked to over the last week agreed with Harbaugh, I think there's also this feeling that a month from now, we're going to have more information than we do right now. And so there's certainly the possibility that some of these things are tweaked or adjusted based on what we see in, say, the Premier League or what we see in, say, the Bundesliga in Germany, or maybe some of the information they're able to gather when NBA teams and NHL teams get back practicing. I guess there's not much hope for baseball, but I think there is that feeling. There is that feeling that they're going to have more information about a month from now.
So what's the big story outside of anything that I've just asked you? Because, the Dak signing for the Cowboys, that's July 15th. That's like a million light years away based on everything else that we're talking about right now. Is there anything else that I'm missing that we're not hitting on? Because the collective bargaining agreement, thank goodness, you see what's going on with baseball. Could you imagine if that thing had not passed shortly before the pandemic hit?
Yeah.
And what the conversations would be like on both sides to try and get everybody in? Or are there going to be conversations like that? You're already seeing the NBA and the NBA PA They are lockstep, but there was a little bit of a hiccup. You're seeing what's going on with baseball. Is there any issue you think that we're going to encounter on that front with the NFL here?
Well,
no?
It's funny. It's funny, Rich. I talked to somebody at the union. It was probably like a couple weeks ago. I said things seem like remarkably, civil between the players and the league. And the response I got is, "Yeah, that's because we haven't talked about the money yet." So I think that eventually is going to have to come. But it's different than in other sports. So in other sports, they're talking about current year money, right? Like baseball, basketball, hockey. Some of those discussions are about current year money. For the NFL, it's really going to affect the 2021 cap more. And so the negotiations that are going to have to take place are, how do we make sure that there's not a fall in the cap in 2021, which is probably going to mean borrowing money from future years. And so that's going to mean the cap could be affected 2 and 3 years out based on how much revenue they lose in 2020. So those are the sorts of things they have to discuss. I don't think that's going to get in the way of camp or the season starting on time, but there are some hard discussions that they're going to need to have. And then other than that, I think there are, some intriguing storylines. You mentioned Dak Prescott. Jadeveon Clowney's another one. He's still out there, former number 1 overall pick. And then I think the mess at the start of camp is going to be where I think you're going to see a lot more roster churning than you normally see, just because a lot of these teams haven't seen their rookies physically yet. They haven't seen some of the free agents they signed. And so I think we could see a lot of roster churning at the start of training camp, which is going to make for a very, very busy July and August for a lot of teams. And then I would say, the one thing everybody needs to be ready for is how the COVID-19 protocols are going to reach into reserve lists. And, how the league's going to allow for teams to have almost taxi squads of players available, or how they're going to be able to manage it if there's an outbreak on the roster. Because everybody knows, you have 53 guys on a roster when the season starts. This thing hits 12. You have 12 guys test positive. Even if they're asymptomatic, you're probably going to have to shelve them. And that's a devastating loss for a team. So how do you manage that? So that's some of the stuff that they're going to have. They still have to work through. They haven't worked through yet as far as the specific coronavirus protocols.
And I've got Thomas Morstead on at the top of our final hour, the punter from the Saints. What are you hearing about the aftermath of Brees, his comments to Yahoo Finance, and then his apology publicly on various social medias, and then to his teammates? What are you hearing about the aftermath there, if there is one?
Yeah, I talked to Demario Davis about this last week, and I think it's sort of like, for him it was, he's taking Brees at his word, but he wants to see Brees involved. And I think that's sort of where the conversation, has changed, and where, players are right now is, I think sort of standing on the sideline isn't okay anymore, and I think we're going to see that reflected in whatever sort of protests we see when we get to September. That players are really looking for full participation from other guys who may not have been inclined to participate in the past. And so I think that's part of the fallout for Brees. Look, he's got 19 years of capital built up as an NFL player, capital built up in the Saints locker room. They know who he is. But I think now, the next step becomes sort of critical for Drew in showing the players showing the other players in that locker room he's behind them. Because I think the one takeaway that guys like Malcolm Jenkins and Demario and the rest of them had when they watched the Brees video was, he hasn't listened to us. And so now I think it's on Brees to show, no, I have been listening to you. I do care about what you guys are talking about, and here's how I'm going to show you.
Albert, you're the best. Really appreciate this. Normally I would say this stuff off the air, but I just want to bring it on the air since, I don't know the next time we're going to talk. But the next time you're on this show, I am going to require you to sign a waiver, but I'm going to call it a pledge, the Rich Eisen Show pledge. You're going to have to sign the pledge. If you can have your family members sign it as well, that would be also required. But again, it's we don't view it as a legal document here. It's just a pledge to the Rich Eisen Show, Albert. Yeah. Okay, just want to let you know.
I'm gonna take my time on responding to this, and and I'm gonna see what comes from up north, because it might not be that different than what comes from south of the border.
No, it might. It
might not be. It may not be much different. Let's just bide our time here, Rich, before we take shots. How about that?
Are you saying that liability may be a concern on every college campus football program?
I'm just saying, like, these things will become public over time, and it's a weird world out there right now. Let's just put it that way.
So, are you saying you're not signing the Rich Eisen Show pledge? That's not really a waiver.
I'd say, you know what, Rich. Let's just say I've taken it under advisement, and I'll get back to you.
Couldn't help yourself.
You know what? Just wanted to let you know. We're going to ask that, and we're going to ask it of all our guests, okay? All of our guests, just to make sure that we're all in the clear. All right, Albert.
Let's just say, let's just say, Rich, there's probably a 17-1 chance that I signed that.
Wow. That was excellent.
I gave you. I should have just hung up. I should have just hung up.
Well done.
Okay. Take care, Albert. You take care.
All right. Thanks, Rich. Have a good one.
That's Albert Breer. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.